Brilliant. How are you doing, Kevin? Nice to say hello. Folks, I suppose we'll get started. As always, it's fantastic to see so many of you on. Hope you received the packs all right. I can see a hell of a lot of familiar faces, which is always, and names on the list, which is always fantastic. It's great that you keep up the interest. It's brilliant. For any of you who are joining for the first time, because I know there definitely is a few who've at least got the packs, even if they're not on here live now. What we do want to hear from you, we want to hear from you throughout. We want to get lots of questions in the chat box, lots of tasting notes, and I'll read them out as we go. But that's enough for me for now. Gary, do you want to introduce yourselves and maybe tell our comrades here the lineup that we're going to go in tonight?
Yes. Good evening, everyone. Good to see you all. Good turnout tonight, and thanks for joining us for this amazing Glen Scotia whiskey tasting. So I am global ambassador across Loch Lomond Group, so across Glen Scotia, Loch Lomond, and very occasionally they let me drink some Little Mill whiskey. But tonight we're really focusing on the Glen Scotias from Campbeltown. Our lineup tonight includes, so in terms of, I don't know what you guys have got packs or whether you get everything poured, but my thoughts for the run through tonight would be to start with standard double cask, move through then into double cask rum finish, onto the seasonal 12-year-old, and then we'll finish up with Victoriana. So if you've not already, if you want to pour double cask, I'll do a wee quick intro bit. We'll get into double cask, and then we'll try and I'll try not to talk too long. We'll try and pepper the chat through as we go. So I imagine a lot of you guys know and are pretty well versed in Glen Scotia and a bit of the kind of Campbeltown piece, but I'll happily revisit, just give you the quick recap. Well, I just grabbed my whiskey as well. So Campbeltown, very far west coast of Scotland, on the Kintyre Peninsula, a small town, basically just off Luke's left ear, right there. Just right there at the bottom. Just pretty much bang on there. Yeah, that's it. So quite remote in terms of getting there from me right now to drive to Glasgow. A terrible idea. I've already had one whiskey, but it takes about 3.5-4 hours. Because you need to go all the way up past Loch Lomond and kind of Loch Long and all the way back down the Kintyre Peninsula. But Campbeltown was a hotbed of whiskey. It was known as the Victorian whiskey capital of the world, and we'll delve a wee bit more into that later on. But ultimately the main rationale for why it became the whiskey capital of the world was that it was on the shipping lanes. So you get ships bringing casks in, but ships available to take whiskey out off into the new world. We had fresh, clean water thanks to the loch that was created by the Duke of Argyll, purely for distillation and for the distilleries. Local barley, plenty of farm land around, so there's lots of local barley being grown. Our proximity to Glasgow, as much as I've just bemoaned how much of a bugger it is to get there, back in the early 1800s, the way transport was to go from Glasgow up into one of the Highland distilleries, because of the modes of transport and the way the roads and things were. The roads were terrible, non-existent. It was a 3-day round trip to go from Glasgow to Highland Distillery and back. But because marine steam vessels were kind of coming to the fore, you could do Campbeltown from Glasgow to Campbeltown on the River Clyde in 3.5 hours. Yeah, that's you done. Nice. So it was easy access, and then there was a local coal mine, so you had fuel available locally as well at a fairly reasonable rate. So it just basically meant there was this hotbed of activity that just meant it boomed for 100 years and ultimately became known as, I said, the Victorian whiskey capital of the world. So whiskey number one, Glen Scotia double cask. So this was when we relaunched the brand 7 years ago. This was one of the original trio, and it's all about, and you'll hopefully get this as we go through them all. It's all about showcasing the Campbeltown style. By that I mean sea salt, bit of salinity, that wonderful bourbon influence, bit of spice, and a real oily mouthfeel. But double cask was always meant to be the entry level, the approachable Campbeltown malt, that real easy drinker. So it's a maturation and first fill bourbon for around, it's not a statement, but I'm happy telling you it's an average of probably about 7. That's finished for about 9 months in Pedro Jimenez sherry butts. 46%. This one, I'm not going to talk about colour on that one specifically because it's got some Carol in it. I'll be quite honest with you on that one. But yeah, non-chill filtered, 46%. Let's give it a wee nose, see what we think, folks. So straight off the bat, you get that sherry sweetness, definitely is there. I get a hint of the bourbon vanilla coming through. We prickle of the spice as well. No, none of the alcohol. I don't get any of the alcohol coming through. Like I said, it's definitely much more of a spice note coming through as well. Right, let's give it a go.
Very spicy.
Yes. Slanjava, everyone. Good health to you. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Scott's got a great tasting note in there already where he says, really tasty, this one.
Yeah, I'll take that. I'll take that every day of the week. Putting my absolute heart on my sleeve, and I'm hugely biased towards this whiskey, because ultimately it's the whiskey that started me on my whiskey journey, and it really opened that door for me and introduced me to Campbeltown whiskey initially, and then everywhere from there. I love it. So yeah, I definitely get. I mean, it's an 8 to 9 month finish in that PX, so you're going to get that sweet PX note up front. I think we'll get a couple of folk who mentioned it. Definitely get the spice. I love that people are picking up the salt note. It's not what I would describe as being the classic Campbeltown characteristics that I kind of introduced there. I don't get as much on this one. They are definitely there. But they're not as prominent as some of the ones as we get into the kind of latter two, because that sherry finish ultimately it subdues them slightly, but that's kind of what you want. What the sherry's doing. It's a slightly younger whiskey. It's rounding off all the corners. It's smoothing everything out, bringing everything together, and ultimately making a ridiculously drinkable whiskey. I am well known to be here to be calling this whiskey flavoured Iron Brew for a very good reason, and that it's a ridiculously quaffable whiskey. For a 46%, like that doesn't drink like 46% to me. It's so smooth, it's so easy drinking. And
for something that's so affordable as well, you know.
No, exactly. Look, and that's a very concerted effort for it. It's like we said, we want this to be your real introduction, that step into, for those that maybe aren't as aware of Campbeltown whiskies. So you're not going to go, not everybody's going to go straight in for the age statement stuff, go in at 50, 60, 70 quid. You're maybe going to want to try, especially for a new region and something like that, or a new distillery, coming in at that 45, 47 quid, that's not that bad for a 46% non-chill malt.
Yeah, I mean, it's £40 here.
There we go.
And that's before everyone here, who most people probably already know, but you'll get a 15% discount code at the end of this. So you're getting 40 quid plus 15% off. We'll dram this good. And I'm not just saying this because you're here, Gary, but years ago I said I tried this for the first time, maybe 6 years ago when I first visited Scotland, maybe not that long ago, either maybe 2017, 18. And I'd never had it before. And we were up in Callendar in a little whiskey shop there, and I was given a sample of it, and I bought a bottle, and I couldn't get over. I was raving when I got back to Ireland. I was like, the value for money. I think I paid 39 quid or something at the time for it, and I was like, I can't remember paying that little money for such a good dram. Like, it was my kind of value for money recommendation to everyone for a long time.
Absolutely, bang for buck. I think it punches so far above its weight. I'm loving some of these notes that are coming through.
Yeah, the tasting notes are fantastic. There's oily, spicy, slips down easily. Says Roger. That's the description of the whiskey, not you, Gary. Ian says sweet, slightly salty, dry fruit, toffee. Gary says peppery, salted, caramel sauce, and a strong sherry depth. Love this. Always have a bottle on the go, says Ian. Yes, lovely to drink. That's very good. Love the sweet and spicy, sweet sherry and spice. I would say almost an everyday whiskey, but that makes me sound like an alcoholic. Lovely nose, some mild saliency and burnt sugars with very mild wood in the background, maybe strong sherry sweetness with some toffee, and then slight peppery finish. Cracking.
Yeah, I think Craig said it quite well in terms of that whole everyday whiskey, and I personally, and I don't know what you guys girls think, but the way I look at my whiskey collection has changed recently, and I don't really look at it in terms of regions or age statements or finishes or anything. It's very much more on that kind of consumption basis, and it's, do I want an easy sipper that I don't really need to think, just a whiskey that I can just really enjoy and not have to think about too much? Do I want a bottle of whiskey that I can share with a few mates when they come round and we can all have a wee chat about something interesting about it? Or do I want an end of night whiskey? Do I want a special occasion whiskey? More along that kind of thing. And this one definitely falls into that. Just,
Yeah.
I'd probably take it one step beyond Craig. I'd say anytime, any day. Like, it's not even an everyday. That's just, like I said, it's whiskey flavoured iron brew for me.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting you say that, though. Talk about the heyday of Campbeltown being in the Victorian era. The last thing from their mind when they were making whiskey was consumption. That's what they were trying to avoid catching. But there you go. That's a 19th century joke. Tosh says, I think it's a little bit fruity, Old Putney 12 on the nose, with the salty Werther's Originals, quite different on the palate with the spice hit. Luke Orr says, coming off the back of a Chinese takeaway, my first sip was all wood, almost a deep earthy tobacco note came through strongly. It's changing now, and more of the sweetness coming through now.
It's funny, like what you've had to eat, what you've had to drink, even where you've been will really affect your palate. For things like your mood can affect your palate, believe it or not. It's absolutely bonkers. Tosh has picked up a real nice one in terms of that fruity note. So the fruit notes is more of a Glen Scotia characteristic rather than those broader Campbeltown characteristics. So from a fermentation point of view, at Glen Scotia we ferment for an average of 128.8 hours. So that's considering that the norm is 48 to 60. And that's all about really creating a real fruity character in the wort before it goes through.
And how many days of the week are you in production, Gary?
7 days. 7 days. We're pretty much running at full tilt. We were up until about 6 months ago. There was only 10 total at the distillery. That includes the visitor centre staff as well. We've just recently taken on another 3 operating staff and then another 1 to pretty much let us go almost 24/7. But we're still only at that 550,000 litres of alcohol a year.
So to cater for that length of fermentation time, how many washbacks do you have?
Now, there's a very good question. We are looking at more. 2, 4, 6, 8. There's currently 11. I want to say. I'll check that and I'll come back to you.
Fair enough.
Yeah. But again, we're not. Let's say we're not rattling through. We're kind of. It's not something we're going for. Long fermentations, by its definition, means we're not rattling through all the stock and just throwing it through the stills. It is all about taking the time and getting the flavour profile right so that the new make is absolutely bang on. And that we can put, well, yeah, that's the thing. You consider, let's say this is an average of 7 years old. So considering that we can put a whiskey out like this at 7, it's just testament to the work that the team do down at the distillery to get that spirit bang on straight from the still.
I suppose that's why I was asking the question, because that over 100 hours fermentation. A lot of people, I suppose, when you visit distilleries, they talk a lot about the fermentation time, but realistically, it was at least originally designed to work around shift work rather than the actual production of the whiskey. So 100 hours, is you definitely are making a considerable effort to make it longer fermentation, like, you know.
Yeah, no, definitely. Craig's just put a nice one out saying work well on an old-fashioned orange bitters. I can absolutely guarantee that is the case, Craig. That's one of my go-tos. I've done that at a good number of events, and orange bitters has always been the go-to on it. So that's a real nice shout as well.
Yeah, and Tony's made a comment on the effort that you made with the shirt, which
Evening,
is
Tony.
fantastic.
Good to see you, man.
And Ian's asked about washbacks. So I don't know if you want to take that one, Gary, or they're like the fermentation tanks where the wort ferments.
Yeah, all stainless steel for us. I'll come back to you with kind of numbers and volumes. I'll double check that, so I'm giving you the exact bang on answer.
Yeah, well, I suppose maybe Ian was asking specifically what they were, but that's where the wort, or the wash is fermented into wort.
Yes,
Beer that then goes into the stills. So you basically make a beer, and then that gets distilled into the spirit, and the washback is where the yeast happens and all ferments. And Kevin's saying you've got 9 washbacks. So
what's that?
Kevin here in the chat has said you've got 9 washbacks. So
thanks, Kevin. You keep me right. You keep me right. Thanks. It's I get too like I know we're looking at more, and I get too caught up in what we do and what we don't have. And Campbeltown works on a very different time scale to everybody, so you don't know whether they've actually done it or not. It's just, was that a plan? Is that done? Is that, well, I don't know.
No, marvelous. Right, might be a good time to I'm going to keep a bit of that double cask because I want to compare it.
If you've not already gubbed your double cask like I almost have, it would be really good to try and keep a wee bit, because now we'll go into the newest version, the double cask rum finish. So what we're looking at is the double cask family as a real exploration of flavour, and through that the double casking process is something that would have been used a lot down in Campbeltown. So historically, like I said, with shipping routes coming through, there would have been casks coming in from the New World, ultimately from the Americas, from France, obviously not the New World. Do you know what I mean? So you would have wines, ports, and then kind of coming out into rums and things as well. So one of the key things for us is not only representing that Campbeltown style within the spirit, but when it comes to casks that we use and any finishing that we do, it's very important that we stay true to that style in terms of again staying true to the casks that were there and that would have been used. So for this one, we've gone for a Guyana rum. So this one's got an 8-month finish in the rum, 46%, again non-chill filtered, and this one I am delighted to say is natural colour. So you'll be able to see this one versus again, if you've got any of the other double casks, is a bit lighter. But again, you're looking at
the first double cask is not natural colour, is it you're saying?
Not natural colour, no,
okay.
There is a little bit of caramel in that. I'm not ashamed to say that, but I think it makes me a very happy boy seeing this as natural.
No, it's a beautiful kind of straw colour.
Yes, so again, and it's reflective of we've at no point ever kidded on that it's not a younger whiskey. Like I said, at 40 quid, it's obviously going to be at that younger spectrum. So, and again, first fill bourbon, then into the Guyana rum, and it's, I think on the nose there's a clear difference straight away. I think I previously, and I've yet to find a better way of describing it. The initial thing I get in the nose is yummy rum goodness is really my best way to sum it up. I'm really enjoying some rums just now, some cask finish rums, some of the Durleys and the Four Square stuff is amazing, and this just tickles that sweet spot for me just now. But it's still a sweetness, but a very distinctly different sweetness.
You get like a kind of a peaches and like almost I don't know how to describe it, like almost like we used to make a Moscow Mule, which although people don't call them Moscow mules these days. I was in Prague at the weekend and they were renamed on all the menus. But let's not get into that. But it was with mango. And we'd sometimes add in fry the mango with a bit of brown sugar afterwards.
Oh,
and
nice.
there's something off this that is really kind of making that pop out.
Yes, so it's gonna be the sugar. So it flicks, but for me between a kind of burnt and a melted demerara sugar. So Guyana rum, and I think Tosh was asking. I couldn't tell you. I don't know specifically which rum casks we use. I just know it is Guyana rum. And Guyana rum is specifically molasses based. So we've done previously we've had a festival, a Glen Scotia festival release in 2019. That was again peated, but that was finished in Guyana rum, and we went through a process. That was a good afternoon where we went through and we tried various rums to try and find which one we thought would work best with the Glen Scotia spirit, and we all landed on the Guyana rum. I think that sugary melted burnt sugar, there's a buttery character to it as well that I think just really complements the Campbeltown and the Glen Scotia style as well.
Yeah, the more it sits in the glass, the more I was going to say like a buttered popcorn almost, like, you know.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And you're definitely getting that. That's coming from that rum and a bit of the vanilla coming through as well. And it really kind of talks to that popcorny note as well.
So we've got some great tasting notes there. John Norfolk says maple syrup. Kevin says very fruity. Banana, again, pineapple, and tropical fruits. Some Neapolitan ice cream. Neapolitan ice cream is a great tasting note, Matthew. I can really get that.
That's a real nice one.
That's because it covers that spectrum between the fruity vanilla, that kind of, even maybe even that light citrusiness. A lot lighter in the nose. Absolutely get a hint of rum. Plantain, overripe banana, molasses, tropical, man. Says Tony. Fruit salad, fruit salad and caramel than the first on the nose and the palate. It definitely is less on the, or maybe more subtle than I see what you're saying. Basically, it's pineapple, brown sugar, banana splits, says Tosh, mango, a little pineapple too. Says Craig. Phil D says getting a wee bit of char too, and fruit salad sweetness, says Tony C. So there's some great tasting notes, folks. Keep them coming.
Yeah, and I don't know if you. I've obviously not done a try of the rum finish yet, but see, even if you go back and your original double cask, going from one to the other, going back to the original double cask, the main note I get on that is the sherry. That's just there's sherry.
This almost is like a typical kind of Highland sherry bomb, and I know obviously it's not Highland, but you know what I mean. You could. I wouldn't have thought it when we first opened the double cask, but when you compare it to this side by side, this could easily be a Glendronach or something, like, you know.
No, absolutely. Right, should we give it a go? I mean, most will probably have.
I think most of us have.
Yes.
Greg says feels like a summer dram. While you're having a sip of that, Gary, there was an interesting point made by Roger about if I can find it, about, I can't find it in the list, but I think he was basically trying to say, you know, how much of the history of the distillery do you take into account going forward, in terms of how you plan and adding washbacks and changing shift patterns and developing new whiskies.
Masses. Everything we do is rooted in the history of the region and the distillery. There's no, as Ian will always say, there is no manual for Glen Scotia. Everything that the guys do in the distillery is passed on from person to person. And there are, I think, so one of my favourite anecdote for it is in terms of running the still. The way, for anybody that's been down in Glen Scotia, the way the still room's set up, the still safes kind of off to the left, and the guys can see so off to the left of the stills, and the kind of valves and things for operating are in between. And what the guys will do is coming through the stills getting ready, and they're getting ready to get into the heart. They'll be standing over at the stills watching the still safe with a hand on the valve, and it's more about watching the kind of flap on the still safe. So before the spirit comes through, there's a flap over the lip of the pipe coming into the still safe, and ultimately the guys are looking for the movement in that flap, and it's genuinely, there's that visual bit of when it gets to a certain level, I've not done it, so I couldn't tell you what that level is. But it's all done on eye. It's not, once we've run for 23 minutes, or 20, 22, 25 and a half minutes, it's a very, very visual. The stills can be quite temperamental, guys, again, depending on how they're being run, how they've been run the couple of days before, how far away they are from, and how far they've been from kind of the maintenance bit. So there is a very, very hands-on approach. Every nod to the historical bit is there. The Glen Scotia distilleries run. There's essentially two computers in Glen Scotia. One's Ian's in his office, and the other one is Hannah's in the shop. Everything else manual. So going through from the washback, from the mash tun through to the washbacks, it's a manual lever in the middle of the floor that comes up. Nothing's done through any control rooms in Glen Scotia, that's for sure. And it's all about, for us, it's all about maintaining that history and that heritage of the region, of the distillery. I mean, we've been on that same site since 1832. Yes, obviously, as with almost every other distillery, there have been some silent periods. But yeah, it's the vast majority of the distillery is as it was ultimately. And history is such a massive part of Campbeltown. So it's a big part of what we do.
It's amazing how it almost mirrors Irish whiskey history in terms of when it was in its peak, was at the time when Irish whiskey Ireland was the biggest producer of whiskey in the world. We outproduced Scotland 5 times to 1.
But then it would have been for very similar reasons. Like that West Coast wet meant you had fertile farmland. The shipping, like I said, I mean, we were the last stop off from Scotland before they went off. But realistically, they probably stopped off at 3 ports in Ireland before they then went off into the world. But you had a much wider coastline where we were just that last stop at the mouth of the Clyde, ultimately before going off. There's lots of the kind of illicit side of things for the entire peninsula is a very interesting piece. So we'll go into more into that in Victoriana side of things. But one of my favourite stories was the Isle of Man played a big role in terms of smuggling, because basically smugglers from both sides would take casks and they would ditch them and bury them in the Isle of Man before coming back to get them at a later date. So from Scotland, Ireland, as all of that was kicking off.
Imagine that, a British Crown dependency not paying taxes. Jesus.
Oh, never.
That must have been a first. Yeah, because I mean we've got a tasting that's not on sale yet. That's going to be in December with Dunville's, Ecklinville Distillery, and the Royal Belfast Distillery, which originally made Dunville's. They operated both. They had a distillery in Campbeltown and one in Belfast, and they operated as the one company across the two distilleries. Nice. A nice bit of a connection there between Ireland and Campbeltown. Phil D here says lime and vanilla on the finish too for me. Tony C says loving this neat, but think it would also make a fantastic dark and stormy. Very good.
Yeah, definitely.
Which ties back in with Phil's lime and vanilla. So see, nice bit of citrus in the dark and stormy. Steph says it gets green on the finish. Jeff says went around the distillery 5 years ago. Campbeltown was a great place to visit. Roger Till says yes, Phil, I get the lime. Kevin says this would make a great old-fashioned cocktail. I think I would I'd try this in something different personally, and then keep the first one maybe for an old-fashioned. You want something that's robust, that's really going to punch through in your old-fashioned.
Yeah.
And you're sweetening your old-fashioned, whereas this is already quite sweet. Just a personal take. I'm not telling anyone how to make their drinks. I like dusting a cocoa powder there for me too. That's an interesting one. James says enjoying this, especially for the price. Definitely getting the pineapple nose and almost boozy pineapple strudel turnover dessert kind of taste. Yeah, that's a really good point.
There's a very distinct. So let's say as much as that change on the nose from the sherry to the rum. The palate's very, very different. You get, again, going back to the original double cask. After a taste of this, I do get more of the dried fruits on the original, and then coming back, you definitely get more of those tropical fruits are without question there.
100%. Yeah,
and I think somebody mentioned it a lot. It's like a fruit salad, that tropical fruit salad. I don't. I'm from Glasgow. Do you know what I mean? A fruit salad for me is a sweetie. Do you know what I mean? It's not a dessert. So like I couldn't tell you specifically papaya, mango, all these kind of bits. But I definitely get a much more tropical note than you do an original double cask.
And John has said dark and stormy question mark. Thanks. It's basically a ginger beer and rum, John.
Yeah.
It's very, very basic.
Most often with a wedge of lime as well.
Yeah, no, yeah, you want to have the citrus in there, but I'm just saying it's one of those 3 ingredients, fairly straightforward drinks that you don't need a load of cocktail kits to make. And I don't mean that in a pejorative sense. I mean that in a positive sense, that you want.
Oh yeah,
easy.
Love a dark and stormy.
Tony says his dark and stormy. Well, he's answered my question there. Tony has. John said thank you. So that's all gone on while we were chatting. Scott has said not as smooth as the first one. Yeah, I mean, I suppose there's different characteristics. I mean, I personally, I don't mean this as an insult to you, Scott, but I don't like the term smooth. I think smooth is such a subjective term.
No, but I think that talks to that individuality of palates, where I would say,
yeah, exactly.
Scott's for me that says to me Scott's much more of a sherry fan, and that's what works for his palate and kind of really tickles him, if you like. Where if you find a rum finish a bit more challenging, then that will come across to you as the first one being a bit smoother, a bit more approachable, a bit more easy drinking. But that's the joys of these kind of tasting, is that we get to try these different things that we ordinarily maybe wouldn't lean into initially.
Yeah, he's giving the thumbs up there, and I didn't mean that in a bad way, Scott. I just meant smooth is yeah. It's like, not for me, whatever. Whereas tasting notes, I suppose, can be a bit more universal, like, but again, that's not a negative on anyone. Right, will we try the
go to whiskey number 3?
Yeah.
So whiskey number 3 is our this year's seasonal release. So this is number 3 in the season. Yeah, number 3 in the seasonal release range. And that's all about trying to find or trying to create a range of whiskies. So we've got the Campbeltown Malts Festival release comes out, limited edition, non-chill filtered, cask strength, some interesting finishes. Every year comes out, obviously around the festival shot caller, and it just goes like Billy. Like we can't make enough to meet the demand for that. So what we try to do is, can we do more of that, like maybe later in the year? And rather than just put out another whiskey for putting out another whiskey, with this one it was really about trying to find something that worked for the season. So in an ideal world, we would have called this something along the lines of the festive release or the kind of Christmas release. But as we know, not all markets and not all countries and not everybody celebrates Christmas in the way we do. So it's trying to make that an all-encompassing piece, and it's from a flavour point of view, trying to create a whiskey that works in this kind of time of year for us in the UK. Nights are getting darker. You want to be in here with the heating on if you can afford it, or in front of a fire. That kind of stuff. It's that warming Christmas whiskey ultimately. And the thing that really leans into that is sherry. So it's been an exploration of various sherry finishes. And this year's, so it's a 12-year-old whiskey, 11 years in first fill bourbon. The final year it's spent in a Amontillado sherry. So without going too deep down the kind of sherry rabbit hole, there's various types of sherry, and it's all down to they're all made from only 3 grapes, a selection of 3 grapes, but it's more about how it's made. So they're how they ferment it. All the sherries are ultimately, they are fortified with brandy, and it's when you fortify it then has an influence on how that sherry develops. So the ones that are unfortified, when they then go into the casks, they get a layer that develops on top of the liquid. It's called floor, and that stops some of the oxidation. But this one develops the floor on top in the cask. But over time, you start to get some holes in the floor that allows oxidation to get into the sherry, and really develop a bit of that colour that comes through. But importantly for Amontillado, the main characteristic from a flavour point of view is a nutty character. And that's the thing that it really brings to this whiskey. So one of the things that kind of coming back to, I want to say is that, so the two kind of main players for me across Glen Scotia, you've got Ian and the team in the town making the whiskey and really producing this just amazing spirit coming off these stills. But you've then got Michael Henry, the master blender across the group, who, I mean, I basically, I think in the olden days, I would have branded him a witch and he would have been burned at the stake, because I don't understand what he does. I can't comprehend how he does it. It's just black magic to me. But it's the marrying of these spirits with the right casks for the right length of time to impart an influence that complements, that brings something new, and really brings the spirit alive. And it's finding the balance. So 12 months in that Amontillado sherry. This one we're going for full cask strength again. So we're at 53.3. Natural colour, non-chill filtered, all the wonderful good stuff. So you've got a really nice, deep amber colour to that. That's Jurassic Park amber for me. Do you know what I mean? I wouldn't be. Well, I'm not going to say I'm going to find a mosquito in that. That'd be a terrible idea.
The nose is really incredible. Like so
yeah,
nutty,
but
so
again,
fruity.
look, considering that's 50+%. Like going straight in with the nose on that.
Yeah.
And I've had a cover on that for an hour, and I'm happy still just putting the nose straight right in there.
No, definitely. I love a good Amontillado, and it really works. The kind of balance between dryness and nuttiness. It's really interesting. Got some great comments coming in there where lots of people talk about the nose. Craig says, agree, amazing on the nose. Just glad you mentioned brandy. I get a hint of brandy. I suppose going to the Amontillado, it would be an unaged brandy, like it would be a raw spirit, so it wouldn't have all the kind of flavors that a brandy would have, but it would be. Tony C says nutty McNut face on the nose. Totally agree. Alistair says best one so far. How much is this? I believe it's about 78 or 79, Alistair. But you'll get 15% off that. £79. So I mean, yeah. David says lots of bourbon influences here. Vanilla with a nutty dryness on the finish. Steph and Sir says and Sherry Mac Sherry face on the palate. Brilliant. Luke Gore says sticky toffee pudding, pecans, macadamia, nuts, lots of nuts, and I totally agree. This is a beautiful dram. There's some really fantastic tasting notes there, folks. Smoky maple syrup, says David. That's an interesting one. Plums, toffee apples, brandy snaps, says Tosh. Christmas dinner done. Sit down, enjoy. I think that's a good idea, Craig.
I think one of the ones, Luke's landed on a real nice one there. That sticky toffee pudding. There is an almost kind of datey character to it, and I think on the palate as well. In a real positive way, there's a chewiness to it. The character you get that classic Glen Scotia, real oily mouthfeel, just coats everything. Definitely a spice, but it is more. Sherry does bring more of that kind of Christmas style, the kind of cloves, cinnamony spice, but then with that nuttiness coming through from the Amontillado. And I think, as we've had with the previous two already as well, one of my favourite things about Glen Scotia is the balance of them. And this is what I'm saying in terms of what the guys do with being able to make sure that no one flavour of these is just steamroller and the rest. Whether you're on the nose and you're kind of dipping in and out, or you're on the palate with a bit of water or neat, there are always going to be waves of flavours and profiles coming through.
It's interesting you're saying about that chewiness, because it definitely, and you can see obviously at that ABV, it's I say non-chill filtered, so you're going to get those kind of heavier oils in there. Yeah. You have the dryness of the sherry, which you're going to feel at the back of your tongue. The alcohol is going to have that more of a tight tart bite because it's a higher ABV, and then there is tannins in there as well that also grip the gum, so it's almost forcing your mouth to chew on it in a really positive way. Yeah, it's got a real presence in there.
You've touched on an interesting one. There's one that comes up in quite a lot of questions in terms of the Campbeltown funk that a lot of people reference and what's going on with that and where that comes from. And it's it comes from that historical point. So going back to where we were the Victorian whiskey capital of the world, where we were a town of 9,000 people at peak. It's not a lot of people. But that town of 9,000 people had overall 32 distilleries at some stage in that time. At any one point, I think the peak was 26, but 32 distilleries came and went through Campbeltown. So if you weren't working for a distillery, you were working for something that did something for a distillery, or you were a fisher. But so small town with loads of distilleries. So it meant that by default, none of the distilleries were very big. So you had small distilleries. And if you get a small distillery, again, realistically, you get small stills. So historically, Campbeltown stills have tended to be quite broad, squat, short. And that meant that you've got, because of that and because of distillation, you're going to get more of those heavier spirits up and over the line arm and into the receiver. And that's fundamentally where the oily character and that Campbeltown funk, those oily, kind of diesely notes that you sometimes get kind of coming through in a good way, obviously. But that's ultimately where that's come from. And I get a bit of that. I think the Amontillado leans into that. And it's just magnificent.
Definitely. Alistair suggested it opens up with a bit of water. I might try that myself.
Yeah.
He says, love a Wookiee dram, plenty chewy. So that's a good one.
I've got absolutely no idea what that means, if I'm being totally honest. Like, that's what.
Have you never
Wookiee dram, plenty chewy?
Have you never seen Star Wars, Gary?
Obviously.
Well, Chewbacca is he's a Wookiee.
A Wookiee dram, right? Okay.
Right.
It was just that series of what I was pure. This feels like some sort of weird cheat code that I'm not understanding. That's.
No, I'm not going to make a weird Wookiee sound now, but you know, you get to the big hairy guys.
I can feel you need to know.
No.
Okay, it was one thing.
I'm not gonna. This is the thing. Maybe after the fourth dram,
folks. It wasn't been recorded. I think we were gonna get away with it.
Well, that was what I was gonna say. If we weren't recording this, maybe. Not for me. 2 sherry sweet, says Roger. Not knocking it, as it is down to personal taste. It is chewy. That's fine, Roger. Yeah. There is horses for courses, different strokes for different.
Yeah, again, it comes down to your palate. Like that's, I would say. Personally, for me, I get more of the sweet notes from the very original double cask. PX by its definition is a sweeter sherry, but that's not to say that Roger's wrong. That's Roger's palate is still getting the sweetness from that. And again, that's not where he's at and his journey. That's not what's floating the boat for him just now. But that's ultimately why you pull the different levers and we do different things with the whiskies, because if they were all the same, it'd be boring as hell. So it's all about trying to work, again, with us from that historical context. So yes, we restrict ourselves to maybe that amount. Now that the SWA have opened it up to that of casks. But it's important for us to stick to those historical roots. Campbeltown, as the smallest of the 5 whiskey making regions, it, for me, still stands apart because it has, I would say it's the only one of the 5 that has a clear and distinct style, identifiable style. I think if we were to ask everybody on here tonight, what do Speyside whiskies taste like, we would probably get 40 different answers, 120 different words. I mean, everybody would say light. We would get quite a lot of breakfast whiskey chat. But I think and it's because of the density of the number of distilleries that are in that region. Everybody, they need to do different things. You need to differentiate yourself from everyone else that's there to stand out. But because there are still only 3 distilleries in Campbeltown, we can really, really just focus in on that Campbeltown style. But it's also down to, again, our stills have always been very small, and we're not going to just change that and up it. We're still within that original building, so we can't do that. And that really defines a lot of the characteristics we get.
There's an irony there because in the 19th century, the Scotch whiskey industry was the great disruptor, breaking all the rules, and didn't give two F's about tradition or anything.
No.
And yet now people in the industry are very much, conservative about that tradition, which is fine as well. But
yes,
just,
and I think that
funny how things change.
I understand why people bemoan that a little, but I think I'll always stand up for the SWA in terms of the protection of Scotch, the protection of Scotch single malt. Is unrivaled. That's why Scotch is still what everybody wants to drink, because you know
I totally agree. Yeah,
what you're getting, and you know those standards are there, and if it's not there, then it's not Scotch. So yeah, we kind of grumble at that.
No, I totally agree. I suppose my point is just, I'm not saying that it's wrong to lead into that tradition. I'm just saying that the first rules that were laid down, I think 1912, to govern the production of whiskey and what you could call whiskey, were done in the face of, driven by Irish distilleries, in the face, at the time when we were part of the United Kingdom, in the face of disruption coming from Scotch in terms of non-age statements, non-blended whiskies, blending whiskies in certain ways and that kind of thing, so it's sometimes I think there's a balance there to be struck between honoring and
definitely. And I think what we all need to remember is that I think it's very easy for us all to turn our nose down to blends. Just as somebody who enjoys a single malt, I don't drink a lot of blends, and I think we are spoiled in the UK with our access to single malts, and we always have been. But what all we need to do is rewind to. I'm trying to think. I'm trying to do my sums now because I think like 1999 was 5 years ago. Like 60 years ago, the 60s was really when we started drinking whiskey as single malt. Everything before then was blends.
Yeah, I suppose it's probably closer to after the oil crisis in '83. It's
yes. That was when the momentum really kicked in. But it was the 60s was when that blending bit kind of took a real turn. So it worked. Don't get me wrong, it worked for us back in the day because in those early 1800s, as much as everybody was drinking blends, they were drinking it as toddies. And for what a blending house wanted for a toddy whiskey was something big, robust, characterful, that would stand up to a toddy, and that was Campbeltown. So that really helped us. But it meant that for the best part of 100 years, if you were drinking Scotch from about, like I said, from the early 1800s to the early 1900s, if you were drinking Scotch, you were drinking Campbeltown Scotch.
Yeah.
It was like 100 years of that, which is just madness. Again, a town of 9,000 people. Look, bonkers. Bonkers.
No, it's impressive. It's like that time Gretna got to the SPL.
Yeah, that's. There's a niche reference.
Talking about history and all that, maybe we could come on to the Victoriana.
Yes. Well, I mean, it's almost like I was leading up to that.
Great segue, Gary. Really
I know. I love it. So Victoriana, is just an amazing Campbeltown malt. Everything about it that we've done with this is trying to be an homage to that time where we were that Victorian whiskey capital of the world. Everything down. So even when you look at the design, so it's the only one of the range that's in a green bottle. Everything else is in clear glass. The design of the label, the design of the carton. So the glass element comes from the fact that in Victorian times, basically 1% of the population could read, if that. So the way they distinguished or they identified what was in a bottle or a jar was through the colour of glass. So blue glass was medicine, brown glass was poison, green glass was the good stuff, was alcohol, and then foodstuffs and everything else went in clear glass. So if it was in clear, you could see what it was. So that's a nod to that as well. So it's really leaning into that heritage, and the liquid itself is what we've tried to do is come up with a modern interpretation of what we think that classic Victorian style Campbeltown malt would have tasted like in its heyday. We're not necessarily based. We're not basing it off any recipe. There's none of that liquid still exists. What we've tried to do is look at what we know about the techniques, the casks, and all of that was used to try and bring all of that knowledge together to create what we think a whiskey from then would have tasted like. So it's a non-age statement, but again, happy to tell you we're probably looking at an average age of about 12 years old here. But that includes whiskey up to and including 18. That's in there to really bring that depth of character. And then what I'm going to do is, if you just give me 2 seconds, I am just going to refer to this because I genuinely keep forgetting this. So it is genuinely a real complex whiskey, but it comes with a real complex recipe, and I don't know what to get there from. So we're at 54.2, non-chill filter. So we're at cask strength, non-chill filter, natural colour. So what we start off with is first and second fill bourbon in terms of the maturation. But what we do is we marry those liquids together. We then take that and we split that between, what's my percentages? Right, 30% goes into PX sherry, 70% goes into heavily charred American oak casks. They sit in those casks for 12 months. We then marry them back together. They then sit in refill bourbon casks again for a further 6 months. And then we bottle it at cask strength, 54.2 for this batch. And it's all about building the layers and those casks and the different liquids. It's all about bringing the layers through into that.
No, it's really interesting. We've got some great tasting notes already coming in. Tony C says a bit of a Dunnage nose. Pastry shop sweetness on the nose, says Stefan Sir. And John says one of the best best value top shelf whiskey sold in the last decade. I'll take this one to my grave.
Please don't, John. Just drink it now, John. You're better drinking it now and enjoying it.
Exactly. You can't drink it when you're gone. Allegedly. Roger Till says blackberry and dark chocolate. Tosh says definitely Roger. And Christian says toffee, apple on the nose for me at first, but huge amounts of complexity on the palate. Now, just want to get a bit of housekeeping in here because this is actually out of stock on the website at the moment, but it will be back in, I'm told, in the next couple of days. And when it is, I normally after these tastings, we send out the email with the recording, which we're doing as normal, but I'll also send a ping when it's back in stock. It's just unfortunate timing in advance of this tasting. So
yeah, so the 15% lasts for a wee while, doesn't it?
Yeah, you can that 15% code is valid for 2 weeks, so it will be back in stock in the next 2 weeks. So Kevin's just pointing out there that it's not available, but it will be available, Kevin, with 15% off very shortly.
Yeah, well, 15, no 50. Don't you give this stuff?
No, yeah, 15, 15.
Yeah. Kevin, we do have it, but we're not obviously doing the 15% code doesn't work on Glen Scotia. So I think this will come back in within the 2 weeks. So I'd say if this stands out for you.
You can wait a couple of days, Kevin, and we'll sort you out, don't worry.
Yeah, definitely. Again, for me, at 54.2, the nose is like a 43 or 46 at a push, I would say.
Yeah,
there's a definite sweetness. The PX is bringing that sweetness. There's a burnt sugar. There's a different spice to it. It's
like travel sweets.
Travel sweets is a great tasting note for that. Look, that's
Tony C says peppery hit, dark chocolate, maca again, red apples, orchard fruits, much loveliness, creme brulee in the nose. That's a great tasting note. Doesn't drink like cask strength, as you were just touching on there, Gary. Yeah, it really doesn't. Yeah. And this, 54.2. You wouldn't think it. Total.
No, but again, the balance, the balance of the casks used, those different spirits getting used, really helps kind of smooth everything out ultimately. Yeah. Slanjava, everyone. I don't know, final dram of the night. So thank you very much, everyone.
Oh, that's exceptional. Dangerously sippable, says Tony.
Yeah, so straight off, I get a hit of the spice. It does definitely start off as a peppery spice. Then I got a wave of that sherry. Starts off the sherry sweetness, but it rolls through into the dried fruits of that sherry influence, the raisins. It's like a dried cranberry note. I know that again is quite specific, but it's a tartness that comes with the dried element. But certainly as it rolls through on the palate, it develops in that spice becomes a bit more cloves, a bit more cinnamon. Yeah, and the raisins back now, definitely.
John says, "Oh my God, that's good." Victoriana, always been a great.
Here, John. Here.
Gary's got interesting taste, not like those fireball sweets in liquid form. I think I can see where you're getting at. But I just personally hate those fireball sweets, but I love this. So but I can totally see where you're coming from. Much harder to pin this one down. Nice complexity. I bought a bottle of this for a few months back for myself and a friend, demolishing this bottle in an evening. Absolutely loved it. Don't judge. But the night went on. We finished the bottle alongside a strong cup of tea, and it complemented the complexity of this immensely. Don't knock till you tried it. Well, I suppose tea is quite tannic as well. So
yes, no, I was just going to say that. I get where that would work. I definitely get where that would work, and the warmth of tea would kind of complement in terms of the alcoholic strength of that as well. So it's this. My rationale for leaving this to the end was in terms of the complexity and the layers to this. Personally, I could nose this whiskey for an hour. I think every time I go,
you've said that about all of them, though, Gary.
What's that?
I think you've said that about all of them.
Well, no, I mean probably this one more so though, in terms of let's say the complexity and the layers that are there. I feel like every time I go back to it on the nose, I pick up something different. And then even more so on the palate, it's definitely what I always refer to as an end of the night whiskey. In terms of being able to pour, so the tumbler you got with your set, this is the one that you want to put a serious chug at Victoriana into this. Sit with that, have it in the palm of your hand, let it warm up a wee bit, let it develop, keep coming back to it and see how that changes as you go through. It's like I said when we started off with the double cask. It's just and I don't mean this in the terrible way that it's a drinking whiskey. It's just drink it, enjoy it. There are the flavors there to enjoy, but it's all very quite surface level, I suppose. Not in terms of the palate, but what you get is what you get. With the Victoriana. This is saying to me, oh no, you want to spend a bit of time with this. You want to be trying to dig into it and really try and find the depths of flavour that are in here.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Phil's got an interesting point. I love how the fruit reasserts itself at the end of the finish.
Yes.
Definitely.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I'm saying. For me, it comes back as raisin, as that final fruit note that I get. If I was to sum this up, and I mean, I'm not standing up, so you can't fully see. I'm very food driven. You may have guessed. So a lot of my tasting notes tend to circle back onto food. This for me is Christmas cake. The fruits, the sherry, or a Christmas pudding even. Fruits, sherry, those kind of warming spices as well. Dried fruits. Love it. Absolutely love it.
No, I could definitely see that. There's always something about the marzipan in the Christmas cake that I just never liked. But no, this is fruity. You definitely get those sherry notes. It's gorgeous, yeah.
That's 54%. That's
well, I was just going to say what Alice just said there. You wouldn't know you're drinking cask strength, yeah.
And I don't know how many pals James shared that bottle with, but I
think he suggested 2. Was it just him and one other person?
No,
£73.
That could have been a pleasant morning after.
It depends when you sober it up, I suppose, you know.
That's very true.
The only cure is the cause. Craig says, what was the price? It was £72. Luke Orse is changing all the time. Just got a green melon note on the nose, and then custard soaked brioche on the palate, amongst everything else. There's some excellent tasting notes there, Luke. And James says 3 of us.
Okay, fair.
Not too bad. Over about 2.5 hours.
Yeah,
I mean, that's actually, that went from being impressive to being fairly standard going there, James. Like, you know.
That's socially responsible drinking, Luke, and that's what we like to.
Exactly.
Everyone towards, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's that? 250 mils each, roughly 275.
No, exactly that.
Well, no, 250 mils would be
750.
Yeah, 750. So less than that. So 225 mils, we'll say, or 230 or something.
No, first one. Right? Okay. No, 70. Sorry, it's a 70.
70 bottle. Yeah.
Sorry, I literally I tasted them with the US this morning where everyone was 75. So.
Yeah. So I mean that's not bad. You know, there you go. That's good.
So, like, putting you on the spot, what's your favourite of the 4 tonight?
It's got to be the seasonal release, I think. Definitely.
Yeah.
If I was to pick up a bottle, it'd be that one, followed by the first one, the double cask. Then this one.
The original double cask.
Yeah, the original one. Yeah.
Right.
I think I always consider, and I've said this before on the tastings, I always take in value for money as well on the thing. Like, you know, it's not just course.
I think especially now, look, like, whiskey has become a much more considered purchase. We're not. Nobody has masses of, if any, expendable income anymore. So if you're going to make a proper treat to it and buy yourself a bottle of scotch, that's got to be considered. The price has got to be a big factor to it, and that's why I think, like I said, it's down to what do I need in my cupboard. If I've got two drinking whiskies open, I'm not going to get another one of them. And if I've got 3/4 of a special occasion whiskey, I'm not having special occasions every other week. So it's got to be a considered choice, and price has got to be a big part of that, definitely.
I mean, especially in the last few, and obviously things are changing now with the way the kind of current climate is, but the increase in cost of some single casks, particularly in the background, I come from Irish whiskey, where you get these phenomenal single casks like Redbreast single casks that are some of the most amazing whiskies ever, but they're like €700 a bottle. And I'm like, you know, luckily through my work, I get to taste those type of things, but people are like, oh, you can't beat that whiskey. That's amazing. Like, that is amazing, but I can't justify having that in front of the TV every night.
Yeah, but, and like I said, that is such a big part of that conversation now. For definite. What's
great comments.
What's the chat from the gang then? What are we thinking? What's everybody thinking in terms of their favourites?
Tony says seasonal followed close by rum, though tough call though. All lovely. Victoriana says Steph. And Sir, double cask rum for Craig. Victoriana all day says Gary. Seasonal release followed close by the Victoriana. Alan Yvonne says 4-2-3-1, which would be Victoriana rum. Seasonal, then double. Seasonal says Graham. Double says. So I think between the seasonal and Vic, just doing a quick scan through there, I think is probably, and maybe the seasonal actually now. There's more seasonal popping up there. Definitely seems to be edging it. That says 4-4-4-4-4. So that's all Victoriana.
But genuinely one of my favourite things about Glen Scotia and Loch Lomond, I think, is that there is, excuse me, whilst there is a clear regional and distillery style, we're pulling on different levers, whether it's the PX, the Amontillado, the rum, and it all plays a slightly different tune to it that appeals to different palates, and that's what we want to do. Don't get me wrong, if everybody comes out and says, oh, it's Victoriana is the one for me, that's good. I'm like, yeah, it's a great whiskey. I genuinely prefer it when it's just a split, because then I'm like, right, we're doing the right thing then. We are producing whiskies that everyone is enjoying to different extents. And that's ultimately the name of the game for us. We want you guys to be buying this stuff and drinking it and enjoying what you enjoy. I'm not going to say to you that this is only what we're doing. It's all about, we call it a range for a reason, obviously.
Yeah, no, that's very, very well articulated, Gary. Totally agree with you. And what's interesting here is that there's a few of the Victorianas. You wonder if we had done them the other way around, which we actually discussed before going live. You said we switched. We were going to go one way and then went seasonal, then Victoriana. Would some people's results have varied as well? Because when you've drank 3 whiskies already, the last one, is always tastes a bit better.
Yes, yeah, and I think, like I said, my rationale for leaving Victoriana to the end is that complexity and the depth there is, and the heavy char casks as well. I think can dominate a wee bit and blow some other stuff out the water a wee bit. But so in terms of a circular point of view, so at the very start I talked about how Campbeltown kind of came to be in that big boom bit. The circular point being how it then came to bust. Whilst I do that though, I'm just literally going to pour a spot more of rum finish, because I literally have that here. So
while
yeah,
you're doing that, I'm just going to pop the just let everyone know I'm popping the discount code in the chat there now. It's WS15GSVT. You can probably figure it out by now, folks. They're all WS15, the initials of the tasting, and then VT for virtual tasting. So
nice, okay. Yeah,
if you're ever wondering,
that runs for 2 weeks. Look,
2 weeks. 2 weeks from today. Yeah.
So it expires on what date? Just for folk that are tuning in.
That is a great question. I imagine it would probably be the 19th.
Okay, excellent. Okay, good man. Yeah. Keep me on your toes. Yeah, so like I said, so there's a very unique set of circumstances that brought about the boom for Campbeltown. But unfortunately for us, there were a similar set of unfortunate circumstances that brought the House of Cards down. The first of those being the local coal mine. So like I said, having coal readily available within the entire area that could be shipped very low cost, very quickly, kept the fires stoked, kept the stills going. So that closed down first, and that meant excuse me, that meant everybody then had to import their coal. That meant fuel costs went up. So if you think of the fact again, 26 distilleries in one town, margins are not going to be great. So I mean that straight off the bat, quite a few of them folded. Excuse me. And as again, like I said, a lot of the distilleries were very small. So it meant that consolidation happened quite quickly. So the guys the slightly bigger guys that were making more money, had more money behind them, started to snap up those smaller distilleries that were struggling. So that condensed a lot of the numbers as well. You've then got the change in consumption. So like I said, originally it was all about toddies and how that robust Campbeltown style stood up to that spirit. As we came into the later stages, it became highballs. Everybody wanted that whiskey and soda, and that then lent more into the spacing, light, floral, that real nice light spirit works well with soda. So Campbell, there you go. There's the guy. So obviously Campbeltown kind of fell out of favour with the blending houses, and then you throw in a World War, and then you throw in Prohibition, and it just everything just came coming down around us, and we went from 26 distilleries at the peak to our absolute minimum 2 distilleries. So there was ourselves in Springbank, and there was a point where, and this is one of the things I love about Campbeltown is that community spirit. And there's a lot of people that think because there are so many Scottish whisky distilleries, we're all at each other's throats and we hate each other, and it's just not the case. I mean, we owe almost everything to so much to Springbank. There was a time when we closed down, we didn't have enough staff. Springbank came over. We were talking like early 1900s.
You weren't talking about the first
Springbank came over and ran our distillery for us. Their staff came over and did the mashing and ran the stills. And then when it comes to the fact that when because we were down to 2 distilleries, the SWA decreed that because Lowlands had 3 distilleries, that would be the minimum that you needed to be a region, was 3 distilleries. So Springbank took that on and they reopened Glengyle, that they now bottle as Kilkerran, to maintain there's 3 distilleries and maintain that regional status. And it's that community feel and the community that got the distillery and our distillery through that really makes Campbeltown what it is, and makes it such a special place for me.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, well said. There's some great comments coming in on your shirt, Gary, but yeah, we don't have to go there. But it's been an absolutely...
Well, listen, look, as I said early on, I get asked quite a lot in Pure, why are you in a summer shirt, like, and this kind of stuff. I'm like, well, surely, if nothing, now when it's the dark nights and all that's kind of rolling in, now's when you need a bit of sunshine.
Exactly.
Like, why only wear these the 3 days of summer that we get in Scotland? Do you know what I mean? So, yeah.
James got a question. I suppose this might be a good one to kind of finish on. James says, I'm gonna double onto this question. So James says, what's your favorite Glen Scotia other than the ones we tasted tonight? And my add-on is going to be, what's your favorite whiskey that's not Glen Scotia, Gary?
So I would say, and I've seen a couple of comments pop up onto it tonight. Like I said, I will, when somebody comes up to, if we're doing a show and somebody comes up and says, what's your favorite dram? A lot of that depends on your mood, what I'm feeling like, how late it is in the day. But gun to the head, and they say you can only drink 1 Glen Scotia whiskey for the rest of your life, 15-year-old. Because for me, that is the epitome of a Campbeltown single malt. It's got the balance of the spice, that bourbon, vanilla character, the oily mouthfeel, the fruity Glen Scotia character coming through. It's just all there in spades. 46%, non-chill filter, all amazing. So I would absolutely take that every day of the week. That's the one. So I'm disappointed in how much you've got left on it. Look, that's, I mean, I have none of that. None of that.
I actually haven't. This came over with me from Ireland. I might crack it open again tonight after this.
You should. No, definitely. I think it's, like I said. So if somebody was to say to me, "What does Campbeltown whiskey taste like?" That's what I'm going to pour. Yeah, it's predominantly bourbon. There's a very, very short sherry finish on that. Like, and when I say short, I'm talking like less, like a month. And that's all about bringing a bit of those drying tannins that you talked on earlier, rather than a big sherry bomb finish. Yeah.
Perfect. And the last question. So, what's your favorite non-Glen Scotia whiskey?
Loch Lomond single grain.
There's go. That's a good answer.
See, you weren't that specific on it.
No.
So the Loch Lomond single grain. And I think it talks about, well, you touched on it earlier, that the kind of the value point of view. So the Loch Lomond single grain is made with 100% malted barley, but through a column still, so we can't call it single malt. But it's got all of the single grain, that malt characteristic. But it retails at like 25, 27 quid. Super approachable. It's really good neat. It's amazing mix. It makes an amazing dark and stormy. Yeah, that's my number 2, definitely.
Just to be above the board, folks. They're the same company, so he's kept it.
Yes. So
he's told the party line for anyone who doesn't know.
Loch Lomond Distillery, Glen Scotia Distillery, and we've got the last of the little milk casks as well.
Yeah, and a cracking company it is. So thank you for your time, Gary. It's been
not at all. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time. I'm happy to take any questions on Loch Lomond, Glen Scotia shirt choices. If anybody's got any of them, that's what I'm okay with on that.
Yeah. Well, I suppose we've been on for an hour and 40, or an hour and 15 at this stage. So it might be good to park. But if anyone has those questions, we can maybe email them on, and I'll forward them to Gary. Our next tasting is already up online. There's a few more. The next 4 weeks are going to be a lot of tastings. One of them, the one that's on sale now, is actually a rescheduled one. The Diageo special release was meant to be on before back when the special releases came out, but we had a bit of a delay on stock, so we had to push it back. So the next two are going to be very fast on top of each other, and so apologies for if anyone is put out by that. It's just because literally just unfortunately we had to move the Diageo one, but there'll be a few coming up. But if you're worried that they're coming on thick and fast, remember they are recorded, folks. You can always get the tasting pack and sit down with it over Christmas sometime. Listen, Gary, thank you so much for your time.
Don't go using it. We're just into November. Look, don't go using the C word. That's just mean.
Well, that's a fair point. But before the Christmas period, we're hoping to have a Loch Lomond W Club exclusive. Now that was picked by you guys. So that was our last Cask committee.
So if you don't like it, it's your fault.
I'm not sure if anyone on the call was actually one of the ones pulled, but there was 20 panelists on that last panel who all voted in that Cask. So it's going to be with us hopefully mid-December, all going well. So we look forward to that one, and we might have you back, Gary, for either Loch Lomond or Glen Scotia tasting in the new year. What you reckon?
I would be more than happy to come back for another tasting with you guys.
James has said there Waterford. He's asked a couple times for Waterford. I'm meeting Waterford tomorrow week, and we'll hopefully nail down a date for Waterford probably in early February, I'd say. So thank you, James. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, Gary. I just James has asked that question a few times. But please do come back. It's been absolutely fantastic. And we'll talk. We'll go out on a high and leave it there before we're all looking at empty glasses.
Yeah,
brilliant.
Slàinte everyone. Thank you very much for your time. I mean, there is a tiny reason. I'm not cheers when you have an empty glass. There is a.
I'm the same here. So cheers, Gary. Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
We'll see you soon.